Hey guys, it's Justin. I'm going to invest heavily in the stock market in the next 2 months, and I'm going to explain why. Inflation is dropping and headlines may say otherwise, but I'm going to explain that it really is dropping and not increasing, and that you guys can make over 10% of your money in the next couple months. Because this is the perfect time I think investors should enter the stock market back again. So here are my reasons why I'm focusing on my intentions to start investing in the stock market and why you should too. Number one, what you need to understand based on history is that when the Federal Reserve moves too aggressively on interest rate, either dropping or increasing, there's always going to be a consequence that always happens. Now there's this balance scale between the economy and how it correlates to people's spending habits. But last week, the Federal Reserve moved way too aggressively on interest rate, which caused stocks to rally earlier this week, which makes no sense to a lot of people because you would expect that if you increase interest rate, you would see the total opposite of stock market dropping. But because banks and investment firms can't make money, they break away from the policy tightening plans mapped by the Federal Reserve for the recession. This in turn means banks and investment firms basically say F you to the Federal Reserve because they need to make money somehow. So instead, these firms start lending money at lower interest rate, removing the risk of a recession because more cash is being moved into the market and basically benefits the stock market. So some people disagree with this, so let me explain in more detail. Now, the main job of the Federal Reserve is to control inflation and the economy. And on the news all around us, they say that inflation numbers are rising, which in turn means more investors with the fear of the market think this is the perfect time to sell their shares. But here's why I think this is so wrong. Behind the big headlines of news channels and all this, there's a lot of evidence that prices are actually falling hard and fast. Gas prices, for example, have fallen drastically, including many more that we'll talk about later in this video. But as these numbers start to trickle down and slowly bleed into the consumer price index and the personal consumption expenditures index, investors will slowly start to ease up on recession fears that Feds and the news channels are telling us. So in turn, makes stocks to rally once again in the future. Now, the second reason why I'm heavily investing in the stock market is because with extreme fear in the market and the recession, that's a sign for investors to start buying. Let me give you guys an example. In the past, when we had an inflation spike in our economy, inflation comes down faster than people think it does otherwise. And this is sort of the formula that a lot of investors take in place, is that the amount of time it takes inflation to spike correlates to the amount of time it takes for the spike to drop. Let me give you guys an example with a graph. As you guys can see on the graph, if you guys look at the correlation between spike number 1 and spike number 2, that time is sort of similar to the time correlating from spike number 2 to spike number 3. We also see the correlation between this from 7 to 8 and 8 to 9, and you see this from 12 to 13, 13 to 14, 14 to 15, and then 15 to 16. So if we correlate this to this year, inflation started around April of 2021, and based on the graph, we can see from 17 to 18, it peaked around March of this year, 2022, which is 18. So that means that the inflation spike took a year from 17 to 18, and which means by next spring of 2022 or next summer, inflation will level off. So once again, when inflation levels off, stocks will rally up again. So when inflation spikes, it's always been an excellent buy signal, even though many hold off. That's why I'm investing before inflation is under control, because that would be the worst time to invest, because then stocks will rally up higher than we want it to be. So to give you guys an example, during 1970, 1975, and 1980, there were 3 inflation spikes. And the S&P 500 were down around 2.8%, but after the first year, it was up 8.8%, and then up to 13% after the inflation spike when there was a recession. That tells you guys when you buy at the peak of a recession, you do pretty well off on the next year or so. Now, my third reason why I'm heavily investing in the stock market right now is because we see inflation declining even though headline says otherwise. Number one, energy prices are down heavily. Now, the price of a gallon of gasoline has fallen almost 23% since the peak in only about a month ago. Not only this, a lot of people correlate energy prices to correlate heavily on the economy, which is correct because without energy, with gas being so high, getting to point A to point B just doesn't make sense. And with energy prices being so high, you can't cook, you can't have AC, you can't have heating. And so it's very important and very central to our economy. Now, number two, rent prices are dropping. Now, with the biggest concern with inflation, that caused rent prices to drive up to crazy prices. But seeing recent real estate trends, we're seeing a total complete opposite with the market in less than a year. We're seeing demands have dropped and seeing more homes available in the past year with more inflation and less demand. This in turn is causing rent prices to drop, just as we are seeing right now. And if you go onto any apartment website, you'll see all these specials saying that they'll give you guys first month rent free and all this. So you're seeing that rent prices are actually dropping. Now, number three, retailers are cutting prices just to clear their inventory. With the holidays coming up, Target, Nike, all these big brand companies are cutting their prices just to clear inventory. This in turn will cause increased consumer demands to start shopping, which will show up in the headlines probably of inflation numbers dropping probably early of next year, 2023. So the start of next year, 2023, I predict that declining inflation will boost consumer confidence and will have stocks rallied up again. So if you invest now, just like what I'm doing, chances are by the next spring or next summer, your investment will pay off probably closer to 10 to 20%. So now is the best time to start investing back into the stock market, and it's not too late to start. So don't buy that new iPhone 14 that just came out, but invest your money into Apple stocks so that by next year summer you can buy two for the price of one. So with that being said, guys, hope you have a better understanding of why investing so heavily in the stock market and why you should also, so that you can increase your wealth in the stock market by next year. So if you did like this video and you thought it was very informative, make sure you guys like and subscribe. And with that being said, guys, hopefully I'll see you guys in the next video. So peace.